Hey everybody, thanks for joining us today. My name is Eric Speck, Peer Support Director at RPH Ally. Welcome to today's Peer Support Show. We have a special guest, Geoffrey Roche, joining me today, and he's going to talk about the importance of building a culture of mentorship and a personal board of advisors to help with your well-being. If you're wondering what that is, stay tuned, and we will get to it right after this. All right, Geoffrey, thanks again for joining me today. How are you?
Good. How are you doing, Eric?
I'm doing fantastic. So thanks so much for reaching out to me. I think after a week or two ago, you saw one of these videos and you reached out to me and said, hey, if you ever want somebody else on your show, I'd be happy to join. So we started talking and I was like, well, what do you talk about? What do you want from me? No, I'm totally just kidding. But yeah, after a brief conversation, I was like, I'd love to have you on the show. So like I just mentioned, we want to talk about having like I want to hear more about this, a board of advisors and building a culture of mentorship to like improve your well-being. So
Yeah,
tell us a little more about that. What is it? How do you go about doing that?
yeah. I think, the idea, if you think about it, right, like in a professional terms, generally in the nonprofit community, we have a board of directors or a board of advisors. In the for profit, we generally have shareholders, right? And when you think about it from a personal end, generally we may have a mentor, but most
Yep.
people don't think about the importance of actually having a board of advisors,
Yep.
which is really, really critical, especially when you're somebody who, may want to grow in your career, may be dealing with challenges in your career, may need people to just bounce ideas off of. The idea here is that you want to have a group of individuals that also represent sort of an interdisciplinary nature. Not You don't want the same people. So if you're a pharmacist, you wouldn't want to just have a group of pharmacists, but you would want to have a pharmacist. Maybe you'd want to have another hospital administrator, or a leader that look up to. You
Yep.
definitely want to consider having somebody who is also going to challenge you, because
Yeah.
the idea of a personal board of advisors is not just for them to say yes, it's
Yep.
also for them to challenge you, so that when you face a difficult situation, or when you're thinking about making a career move, it's somebody who's going to give you guidance, but also say to you, is that the right decision? I'm not so sure. And
Yeah.
so I think this
Yeah.
is really critical in healthcare.
Yeah. You need somebody to call you out on your BS. A lot of people won't call you out on your BS because they're trying to be nice, they're your friend or whatever. But I think a real friend, a good friend, or somebody who you want on your board of advisors is going to call you out on your BS. And that's kind of the whole point of it. So tell me, Geoffrey, how many people are we talking about are on this board?
Yeah. So I always say an odd number is good, because if you ever have a situation where, you know, an even number where everyone agrees, or if they're tied with,
Yeah.
3-3, for example, probably not a good situation. So really anywhere between 3 to 5 is generally kind of a good number.
Okay.
A lot of times people kind of stick to that smaller number, because again, this is going to be a group of people who you're going to go to often. And I have three, for example, that I go to often, bounce ideas off of. They give a lot of feedback, those types of things. And I have found that in healthcare, it's really important. I started my career in a hospital administration role, and so I also worked with a lot of pharmacists, a lot of pharm techs. And when I look at the role of the critical role that pharmacists and pharm techs are in, especially, we can all benefit from having a personal board of advisors,
Right.
um, because everyone has different experiences, and they
Yep.
can influence and help us.
Yep. Yep. So you're using these board of advisors as mentors in a way.
You're
Yep.
using them as mentors, but you're also using them as, at times, advocates. And then
Okay.
also at times you're using them to, not just hold you accountable, but challenge you to make sure you're making the ultimate best decision in the best interest of you, your
Yep.
family, your workplace.
Yep. It all sounds fantastic. So if somebody like really likes the way this sounds, how do they go about creating their own board of advisors? Are these people who they currently know, maybe they're friends with, and they want to approach these people? What do you say? You say, I'm creating this board of advisors for myself. Would you like to be a part of it? Or can it be somebody who maybe you don't have that personal relationship with? Is it somebody you can reach out to? Like maybe you know them on social media, you follow them on social media, or is that too distant of a relationship to have somebody on your board of advisors?
No, I think in this day and age, Eric, it's even more common that that may be the case, right?
Okay.
Because, we're talking about a very different workplace. We're talking about a very different environment. For example, I had a person who I've gotten to know, but actually only met once, uh,
Okay.
to be honest. But we've been talking quite a bit. And recently he said, "Hey, I want to have you as my mentor."
Okay.
He happens to be a nurse,
Okay.
and he comes to me for all advisory type of related things in his career now.
So
And
go ahead. Go ahead.
oh no, go ahead.
I was going to say, so is that a good way to go about it, is to ask somebody, hey, would you be a mentor for me? I'm sure there are
Yeah,
different
I think
strategies, but that seems like a good one.
yeah, and I will say you definitely want to have a conversation, right? Like you definitely want to have a conversation first. I would never encourage anybody to just write to somebody or
Oh yeah.
text somebody. Like because the idea of when you mentor and then really when you become a personal board of advisor, the idea is that it's not just a transactional thing. And oftentimes I think a lot of people will have people that they go to kind of off the cuff and ask for advice. But the
Yeah.
idea here is that this is truly relational and
Yeah.
it's truly intentional.
Yeah, that's really good. And then you're talking about a culture of mentorship. And when you say that, when I think of culture, I think of, a team at work, and the culture you have there. So what is this culture? Is this culture the one person with their board of advisors, with their mentors? Is that the culture? And then maybe they're surrounded with other people who also have a board of advisors?
No, when I'm talking about a culture of mentorship, I'm actually looking more at the organizational point or the team to your point, right?
Okay.
And I I I regularly say that when you look at healthcare in many ways, we have forgotten that healthcare, one of the most important parts of being in healthcare is human centered. And when you
Yeah.
look at healthcare organizations today, we don't really see a whole lot of human centeredness being practiced. And when you look
Yeah.
at a time when patient engagement scores have plummeted, employee engagement scores have plummeted, we can see the issues of burnout. We can see the issues of people resigning. We see
Yeah.
the issues with retention. We see less people wanting to work in healthcare.
Yep.
There's a culture issue. And there
Yep.
and frankly, many ways it's because we haven't been human centered. And so the
Yep.
idea here is that we embed in the organization an intentional focus on mentorship.
Gotcha. You're talking about all those problems in healthcare, and we were talking about how the walkouts happening in pharmacy at some of the large chain pharmacies where the pharmacists are just sick of it, and definitely not a human-centered culture. It appears for that to be happening. So if it's not human-centered, if that's why we're having these problems, what is it centered? Is it a profit-centered type situation, or what would you say it is?
Yeah, I think, for some organizations it could be profit centered, right? I think for others it is really the fact that leaders need to really get, out of their offices and spend
Hmm.
time with the front lines. They need
Yeah.
to hear regularly and consistently what the issues are and they need to act on them.
Yep.
I regularly have said that I think in many ways the reason we're having some of these challenges is that our healthcare system has gotten too large and our healthcare organizations have become larger. When I was in
Yeah.
a community hospital, we didn't have these challenges. And you know
Yeah.
why? Because we rounded as leaders. Our
Yep.
CEO rounded, every
Yep.
leader rounded. And it wasn't just round for 10 minutes, it was round for hours. And then take notes on that rounding so that you would address them. And I
Yep.
think today we have just gotten away from those really intentional efforts that make a huge difference.
Yep. Yeah, you mentioned the frontline workers and nobody really listening to the frontline workers. A lot of it's kind of the top-down direction, and a lot of times the person at the top really has no idea of what's going on the front lines. So why is this person trying to tell the frontline people what they should be doing and how they should be doing it? They're so far removed from it, they really don't know. And then when it comes time for those frontline workers to provide suggestions or recommendations or whatever up to the top to try to implement some changes, a lot of times they don't want to hear that. I know they call that a bottom up approach, I believe, right? So it's kind of like you take the pyramid with one leader on top and then everybody else down below, you flip it upside down. So you have the people up on top. They're the ones who are kind of controlling, making the decisions. And a lot of times when you study organizations like that, you notice they do have much better outcomes, whether it comes to profitability, retention, or all the other metrics you look at in a business. And why would you say, with that evidence, because I think there are a lot of organizations, a lot of studies that show that, why do some organizations tend to not do that still?
Yeah, I think in many ways, particularly in healthcare, we're still at a time where we have 5 different generations in the workforce, right?
Yeah.
And most of the leaders happen to be in the more seasoned generations, I'll say.
Yeah.
And they came out of a culture of leadership where they were trained on command and control, and they were
Yep.
trained on leadership qualities that were not about engagement. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think that's what we're facing today. And I think you have other generations in the workforce who are saying enough is enough, treat us for who we are, and respect us for who we are. And I
Yeah.
think, until that happens, we're going to see more walkouts. We're going to see more
Yeah.
strikes.
Yep.
And, as the son of a nurse that actually spent time once with my mom picketing back in the day when she was a nurse,
Oh wow.
I applaud those people,
Yeah.
because the reality of it is when enough is enough, you've got to take it into your own hands from an advocacy perspective.
Yeah. You said a lot of these people kind of at the top are more seasoned. What that sounds like to me, as time goes on, these kind of situations are going to get better and be less and less common. Would that be an accurate statement?
I'm hopeful. And,
Yeah.
and the reason I say that is that I think the other generations, really subscribe to very different leadership philosophies. Um, Also have a stronger sense of really, the importance of creating a sense of belonging. And so I'm encouraged. The reality, though, is we're losing a lot of really, really good talent in all
Yep.
of healthcare right now that are also at those younger ages.
Yep.
And we've got to do something to change that. And so I think the opportunity is for all leaders, whether clinical or non-clinical, to really look at these issues from a human-centered aspect and ask the question, am I doing right by my employees and by my patients? Because we
Yep.
know that our decisions for our employees impact our patients. And the truth is in the pudding. We see it.
Yep. No, I agree completely. And with people leaving healthcare or not entering healthcare just because the way things are today, that's really scary when you go to think about, well, who's going to be there for me when I'm in my upper years and I start needing to see a doctor more and requiring more medical care. And there's a shortage of doctors now because things that happened, 20, 30 years before, and nobody wanted to get into healthcare because the way the
Yeah.
healthcare workers were treated and the burnout and everything else that we're hearing about and seeing going on right now. So it seems like to me, if there's an employee, whether they're in healthcare or not, and if they're at one of these organizations where there is very much authoritative, top-down kind of approach, and they're not sure what to do, I think there are a lot of people who may feel like they're in that situation where they don't have any say in anything, despite them being on the front lines and having more information than anybody else. This is when it would be really good to have that board of advisors and you ask them, hey, Geoffrey, what do I do in this situation? I think it's kind of hard to give a blanket statement for everybody to say, oh, leave that organization, go somewhere else. Well, I think there's a lot of things that depends on, a lot of variables there that could maybe you want to stay and form some different kind of plan. So yeah, if you're not in a situation you're in a situation you don't want to be in, you don't know what to do, reach out to that mentorship, create that board of advisors, and get some guidance from people who maybe have a little bit more wisdom or knowledge and can guide you on the next best steps for you. So yeah, having that board of advisors could be extremely helpful in a situation like that.
Absolutely. Yeah, and the
Yeah.
other thing I wanted to say too, right, is to your point, it's not just doctors and nurses, it's also our pharmacists. And what people don't realize is that pharmacists are the ones that give the most vaccinations every year.
Yeah.
So if they're walking out,
Yeah.
the access to vaccinations goes down. And, we're talking about flu season, a whole host of other things that become
Yep.
challenging. And so, people have to pay attention to the facts.
Yep. Yeah. And the vaccinations is definitely a big one. And the other one is just, simple healthcare advice. If you have a rash on your arm, you can go into any pharmacy. The pharmacist can take a look at it and likely recommend, something to put on there, or to
Yeah,
seek further treatment. The pharmacist wasn't there. You have to, go to urgent care, make an appointment with your physician. Who knows? But being the most accessible healthcare provider is very, very valuable to our communities. And if those people are leaving, that's not good for our communities. So,
absolutely.
yeah, thanks for adding that, Geoffrey. We're at about time, so I want to wrap things up. Do you have any final words of wisdom or anything you want to share with our viewers?
No, thank you for having me, and wonderful to be here with you.
Yeah, Geoffrey, thank you so much. Thanks everybody for watching. If you have any questions for me, you can find me at rphally.com on the peer support channel. Thanks again for joining, and we will see you next time. And Geoffrey, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.